The Ethiopian Bible is not a footnote in Christian history. It is the oldest and most complete biblical canon on earth. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church is one of the oldest Christian churches in the world, established in the 4th century, within the first few centuries of Christianity itself. While the Western Church stripped its canon down to 66 books, the Book of Enoch resurfaced at the beginning of the 17th century when it was discovered in Ethiopia, written in an Ethiopic language. The Book of Enoch is preserved in its entirety in the church at Ethiopia and is included in their Bible. The Ethiopians claim it was divine scripture and treat it as such to this day. This is not a minor detail. It is the crux. The very texts the Western world rejected, texts containing the most detailed apocalyptic revelations about the last days, the betrayal of alliances, the rise of warring nations, and the final judgment, were hidden in plain sight inside the Ethiopian canon for over 1,600 years. By the 5th century, the Book of Enoch was mostly excluded from Christian biblical canons, and it is now regarded as scripture only by the Ethiopian Orthodox Church and the Eritrean Orthodox Church. Ask yourself, why would the Spirit of God preserve the fullness of prophetic revelation in the hands of one ancient African church, at the edge of the known world, unless its contents were meant to re-emerge at precisely the right hour? As Enoch was the first man ever to write letters, the Ethiopian Church believes the opening verses of the Book of Enoch were the first words in history to have been written. The word of blessing of Enoch, wherewith he blessed the chosen and righteous who would be alive in the day of tribulation for the removal of all wrongdoers and backsliders. It is quite amazing that perhaps the first words ever written dealt with the end times. It is even more amazing if one is of the school of thought we are living in those last days. If one ascribes to that theory, then Enoch was speaking to this generation, thousands and thousands of years prior. The very first recorded prophecy given through a man was not about prosperity or comfort. It was about what is happening right now. The Ethiopian canon contains what the rest of the world's Bibles do not, the full, unbroken narrative of Enoch's apocalyptic visions. Within it, we find the architecture of the last days laid out with terrifying precision. Enoch, a righteous man whose eyes were opened by God, saw the vision of the Holy One in the heavens which the angels showed me. And from them I heard everything, and from them I understood as I saw, but not for this generation, but for a remote one which is for to come. He was not writing for his contemporaries, he was writing for us. Now look at the geopolitical landscape as it stands today, and ask whether these words ring hollow or whether they burn with prophetic fire. While President Trump is pursuing a peace agreement regarding Iran, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's government remains committed to dismantling Iranian and Hezbollah capabilities. The spying allegations come amid this strategic divide. The conflict in Lebanon is causing an extraordinarily open rift between Trump and Netanyahu. Trump's agreement does not bind us, Israel's far-right national security minister, Itamar Ben-Gvir, wrote on social media. An ally saying to the nation it once shielded, "You are on your own." A protector turning diplomat with the very enemy of its covenant partner. A nation once considered untouchable now being excluded from the negotiating table. Israel has been excluded from the negotiations and was even blocked from reading the text of the truce deal before its release, despite having more existential interests in the conflict than the United States. This is not ordinary geopolitics, this is scripture in motion. The Ethiopian Bible preserves not only Enoch, but a robust prophetic tradition linking Persia, Iran, Cush, the Horn of Africa, and the land of Israel in a final days configuration. In Ezekiel 38, verse 5, the first nation named was Persia. Now, that's what it was known as in Ezekiel's day, but modern-day Persia is the nation of Iran. Some 2,500 years ago through this prophecy, God was saying that in the end times Iran would be sending military forces against Israel in the Middle East. In a prophecy concerning the end times, it was said that Cush would be part of Gog's vast coalition that would attack Israel, but would ultimately be defeated. The prophet Daniel also mentioned Cush as being involved in a war in the end times. Daniel 11 verse 42 to 43 prophesies of a time, shortly before the return of Christ, when a European beast power will be in control of the Holy Land. At some point, provoked by events in North Africa, the king of the north will stretch out his hand against several nations. But he will gain control over the hidden treasures of gold and silver and over all the precious things of Egypt, and Libyans and Ethiopians will follow at his heels. The Ethiopian Bible did not merely preserve these prophecies in passing. It preserved them as living canon, as texts to be read, believed, and applied in the time of their fulfillment. The Western Church, having removed Enoch and marginalized the Daniel-Ezekiel axis of end-time prophecy into academic speculation, is now watching these scriptures play out on the evening news and scrambling to catch up. Inside the Book of Enoch lies one of the most overlooked prophetic parables in existence, the vision of the 70 shepherds. There is a prophetic parable in the Book of Enoch regarding 70 shepherds from the days of the kings to the end of the world, and among these are what Enoch calls 12 last shepherds. The current prime minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, is the 12th shepherd of Israel that has ruled in Israel since the nation was reestablished in 1948. Enoch's prophecy is that during the time of these 12 last shepherds, the nations around Israel keep tearing the people of Israel and swooping down upon them and devouring them. The people of Israel remained silent, but the leaders of Israel lamented and cried out. And those nations fought and battled with Israel and sought to lay low the state of Israel, but they had no power over it. This was written thousands of years ago and preserved solely by the Ethiopian Church. Not Rome, not Constantinople, not Geneva, Ethiopia. Look at the current reality. On February 28, 2026, the United States and Israel launched large-scale strikes on Iran, marking the start of the 2026 Iran war. The attacks included the assassination of Khamenei. On April 7, 2026, Iran and the United States announced a temporary 2-week ceasefire. On May 24, 2026, reports indicated that the United States and Iran were nearing a broader peace agreement following months of conflict and stalled negotiations. On June 17, 2026, Trump and Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian signed remotely the Islamabad Memorandum to end the war between both countries and Israel. Nations swooping, leaders lamenting, allies negotiating with adversaries, the shepherds of Israel watching the flock being bartered over by foreign powers. Enoch saw this. The Ethiopian Bible carried it. The deepest revelational layer here is not simply that wars are happening, wars have always happened. The prophetic signature of the last days is the nature of the betrayal, those who were once shields becoming brokers of compromise with the enemy. Israel wasn't involved in the negotiations with Iran, though Trump said at a press conference this week that he had sent Israel a copy of the document. Before he signed it, 31 Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has remained defiant, saying his troops will remain in southern Lebanon for as long as Israel's security requires it. Surprisingly, the agreement does cover Israel's war with Hezbollah in Lebanon and raises the prospect that the United States' military presence in the region is open to negotiation. The deeper problem is trust, or rather its absence. Tehran watched the United States withdraw from the JCPOA despite a statement by the IAEA that Iran was complying. Then the United States used negotiations in 2025 as cover for an Israeli attack. As a result, it's now likely that Iranian leaders doubt Washington is negotiating in good faith. No one trusts anyone. Every alliance is fractured. Every handshake conceals a dagger. This is not the world of ordinary diplomacy. This is the prophetic landscape described in the Ethiopian Enoch, where the shepherds God appointed over Israel are judged precisely because they allowed more destruction than God authorized. The 70 shepherds exceeded their mandate. They were supposed to discipline, not destroy. They were supposed to protect, not abandon. And in the end, they are judged for it. The Son of Man figure in Enoch is given authority and power, and he will sit in judgment over humanity. The concept of divine judgment by a messianic figure is echoed in the New Testament, where Christ is described as the judge who will return to separate the righteous from the wicked. The Son of Man in 1 Enoch is thus a precursor to Christ's role in the Last Judgment. Jude 1 verse 14-15 states, Enoch, the seventh from Adam, prophesied of these, saying, Behold, the Lord cometh with 10,000s of his saints, to execute judgment upon all, and to convict all that are ungodly among them of all their ungodly deeds. This is the end of the matter, not the memorandum of understanding, not the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz, not the Abraham Accords expansion. The end of the matter is the appearing of the Son of Man, who was named in the Ethiopian Enoch before Daniel ever saw him in vision, before John wrote a single word of revelation. In 1 Enoch 48 verse 2-10, this figure is pre-existent, existing before creation, and plays a role in bringing salvation and judgment. Even before the sun and the signs were created, before the stars of the heaven were made, his name was named before the Lord of Spirits. The Ethiopian Bible didn't just predict that there would be wars. Every prophet did that. What the Ethiopian canon uniquely preserves is the structure of the end. A world where nations that once stood together fracture apart, where the guardians of Israel become its negotiators with its enemies, where peace deals are signed while bombs still fall, where every treaty is a temporary pause before the next escalation. And at the crescendo of this chaos, not a new world order, but the Ancient of Days takes his seat, and the Son of Man receives dominion. There is a verse that the Ethiopian Church has held as a seal over its own prophetic destiny for millennia. Psalm 68:31, Princes shall come out of Egypt, Ethiopia shall soon stretch out her hands unto God. This is a prophecy of Ethiopia's future participation in the worship of God. It points to the ultimate inclusion of nations, including Ethiopia, in the promises of God. Ethiopia stretched out its hands, and in those hands it carried the very scrolls that the rest of the world threw away. The Book of Enoch, the Book of Jubilees, the fullness of prophetic revelation that describes in vivid, symbolic, and terrifyingly precise language the exact geopolitical configuration we now inhabit. Iran at war, Israel isolated by its own allies, peace deals that are not peace, and the nations gathering for a confrontation that only the return of the righteous one can resolve. Matthew 24 verse 6-7, preserved by the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. And you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. For nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. And there will be famines, pestilences, and earthquakes in various places. The end is not yet, but the birth pains are unmistakable. What we are witnessing between the United States, Israel, and Iran is not the fulfillment of end-time prophecy in its totality. It is the setup. It is the alignment of nations into exactly the positions described by Ezekiel, Daniel, and the Ethiopian Enoch. The ally pulling away, the protector becoming a broker, the enemy being legitimized. The nation of God standing increasingly alone. And behind it all, a prophetic text preserved for millennia by an African church that the rest of the world ignored, now proving itself more relevant than every intelligence briefing, every foreign policy white paper, and every diplomatic memorandum being signed in Versailles. Enoch predicts that those who oppress the righteous will face severe retribution when judgment comes. As Enoch's vision concludes, he paints a vivid picture of the end times. The righteous will shine brightly, while sinners will lament as they diminish into insignificance. The Ethiopian Bible saw this. It always saw this. The question was never whether the prophecy was true. The question was whether you would be watching when it began to unfold. You are watching now,